everyone, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor. Today we're talking about the differences between complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. There is some overlap. These two can be confusing, but I hope to straighten that out and help you understand the difference between the two and to maybe understand yourself as well if you have one of these two diagnoses. And by the way, if you want to see my potbelly pig, make sure to stick with the video because I'll be showing her in this video. And she might even turn into the therapy pig here, where I'll show her pretty frequently. So if you want to see more of Tilly, please like and subscribe. It helps the YouTube algorithm push my videos out more, and I appreciate all of your support. Hey everyone, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor. Today we're going to talk about the differences between borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD. So there is some overlap between the two disorders, but they are still two distinctly different disorders. Both are caused by extensive childhood trauma and abuse. And they're highly comorbid, which is what we say, basically that the two can co-occur together at the same time, basically. And they do pretty much occur together in quite a high frequency. So it's not uncommon to have the two together. They do have an overlap in some of their symptoms, which can make it a little bit more confusing to tell the difference between the two. And there's essentially, it's due to significant disruption in the attachment system between caregiver and child when all of us are under the age of 18. Really in those 0 to 5 years of age is typically when the most damage occurs in terms of our attachment systems between parent and child. But again, the ongoing relational violations or abuse and neglect in childhood, basically. It's a repeated violations, as I say. So layer after layer after layer over many years is responsible for both disorders, for example. And there's, disruption to significant emotional bonds between the child and the caregiver as well, which is why you see the distressing symptoms in the now adult child of an abusive parent. So let's talk a little bit more about the attachment that underlies the distress of these two disorders. So disorganized attachment is going to underlie borderline personality disorder, and avoidant attachment is going to underlie complex PTSD. So disorganized attachment is really when a caregiver is extremely abusive, extremely erratic, extremely volatile, and scary, quite frankly. And so the child simultaneously desires close, loving connections with the parent, of course, but also knows that the parent can be terrifying and volatile and walking on eggshells, and you never know when you're gonna be abused and hit and screamed at, for example. So that causes what we call disorganized attachment and underlies a lot of the distress that borderline individuals feel. So they're simultaneously both feeling very empty inside and strongly desiring to feel love and connection to another person, but they're also terrified of actually having that loving connection with another person. And so you'll see them push away as well. So when they get triggered or some of those wounds kind of come to the surface, you'll see this wide swing between I love you and clinging and please don't abandon me, and I'm absolutely terrified of being hurt, so get the hell away from me and I hate you. So they see the world in very kind of extreme black and white terms of I love you, I need you, or I'm absolutely terrified you're going to hurt or abandon me, so get away from me. So as you can see, it adds to a wide degree of distress and acting out behaviors that is more commonly seen in borderline individuals, as well as self-harm too, because the emotional pain and distress is at a higher level. Versus complex PTSD, on the other hand, is due to avoidant attachment. So that's when the parent or caregiver really did not meet any of the child's needs for nurturing and closeness and to be seen as an individual. Childhood emotional neglect, for sure, is more highly correlated with CPTSD, where the parent just fails to see the child really at all. And the wound of invisibility, as I call it, from my other video on childhood emotional neglect. And so the person with complex PTSD has learned not to rely on human beings at all. I'm not going to get my needs met, so therefore I'm not going to have needs of people, and I'm just going to kind of keep to myself and not need people. So you really won't see a a push-pull effect from complex PTSD. People with CPTSD are much more happy being on their own, for example, and less likely to really feel like they desperately need to have a partner, for example. And people with CPTSD don't necessarily fear abandonment to the extent that somebody with borderline personality does either. All right, borderline personality disorder is seen in about 9 to 18% of adults that come in for mental health treatment. It's characterized by disassociation. So, disassociation is really where your mind is elsewhere and you're not fully present in the moment. And also by depersonalization and derealization. So, that essentially is where you don't feel real. You experience like you're really an outside observer of your own body or your thoughts or feelings. And also characterized by profound emotional emptiness, intense anger that is frequent and difficult to control, and also difficulty trusting others. So this is a very distressing disorder that causes quite a large degree of distressing emotional symptoms and can drive that self-harm and suicidality as well. So, borderline individuals also have a disturbance in identity formation. And what that really means is that their sense of self is damaged. They don't have a strong sense of self and authenticity, and it's more fragmented than those with complex PTSD. They also have repeated, rapid, abrupt shifts in mood, impulsivity, and self harm. Borderline individuals will also have very unstable relationships, especially romantic relationships. This is where we see a lot of the distressing symptoms come out. And they're characterized by lots of instability, lots of volatility, hostility, anger, especially if they perceive that their romantic partner might abandon them or, is going to hurt them in some way, shape, or form. And you'll see an alteration between like clinging and really being super distressed, thinking that their partner might abandon them or end the relationship, which is a sense of enmeshment. They don't have a strong identity in terms of recognizing themselves as an individual versus their partner. It's very enmeshed. It's hard to tell where one person begins and the other person ends. And they really are impulsive and really have an extreme push-pull to the relationship. So borderline individuals, as I mentioned earlier, really come into being due to severe abuse and neglect in their childhoods. Emotional abuse and neglect is found to be very prevalent in this population, as well as physical and sexual abuse. And sexual abuse really is found to be most strongly associated with not only borderline personality disorder, but also PTSD. And again, they're going to have stronger fight responses as opposed to some of the other disorders. So that's where you see that volatility and hostility and high degree of anger. Their nervous systems are really primed to fight, to protect themselves, as opposed to some of those other fawn or people-pleasing or fleeing or running responses you might see in other individuals. All right, so CPTSD is seen in about 36% of adults coming in for mental health treatment. It's going to share a lot in common with regular PTSD. So individuals with complex PTSD will have those re-experiencing of traumatic memories and emotions from past abuse. They're going to have avoidance of trauma reminders. You'll see them trying to avoid people or places or even emotions or memories related to the abuse. They're going to have a hyperarousal where the nervous system really is overengaged all the time. They're going to have hypervigilance, feeling constantly on guard, as well as emotional numbing and dysregulation. It's hard to self-soothe, for example, if they get very emotionally upset. And they're going to have trouble in relationships, but again, characterized by more emotional detachment and avoidance as opposed to the borderline individual. Individuals with CPTSD will also have difficulty with their identities as well. So they're going to have what we call a negative self-concept. And so that's really where they struggle with guilt and shame and worthlessness. They feel like they're a failure. They struggle with incredibly low self-worth. And it's very chronic and long lasting. So as opposed to BPD, where it's more of a fluctuation, CPTSD is very chronic and very long lasting. And they blame themselves as well for the abuse. And they have alterations in spirituality and meaning and purpose of life. Again, their relationships are characterized more by avoidance of others. And again, this often occurs without BPD, and that is due to childhood emotional neglect. So that really is one of the core reasons CPTSD develops, is due to childhood emotional neglect. Individuals with CPTSD have a lot of betrayal trauma in childhood. So betrayal by main attachment figures who should have been there for them and should have been loving and were not. They're going to have severe emotional detachment and fear of closeness within their romantic relationships. And again, emotional and physical neglect is more likely if you see BPD and CPTSD comorbid or happening together, as well as witnessing interpersonal violence. So the two are more likely to show up together when you have emotional and physical neglect and witnessing violence in the family. And again, flight and freeze responses are more prevalent here as opposed to the fighting responses of BPD. I hope you found this video helpful. Again, please leave me a like and subscribe. Helps my channel grow. The YouTube algorithm will not let us grow without your likes and subscribing, and I appreciate all of your support so much. Feel free to leave a comment. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. But I hope that you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Dilly, Dilly. What? Are you a big pig? 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 You want treat? Carrot? You want carrot? Banana? Yes?